Bring in show music, please.
I'm CNBC producer Klaire Odumody. Today on Squawk Pod, legendary investor Leon Cooperman on the markets.
I think stocks are the best place to be. I would avoid bonds.
And what he thinks investors are looking for in the 2024 presidential election.
We have two candidates running for office. Neither one talks about the deficit or the buildup of debt.
And the world descends on New York for the United Nations General Assembly. Defense tech company Palantir's Mike Gallagher on President Biden's final UN address and hotspots around the world.
I would like to propose a new theory of international relations, which is called winning. You have to win the war in order to impose the terms of the peace.
Plus, Visa sued over high fees, Boeing's best and final, and the staying power of the classics.
You want a quick boomer update?
Yeah, we turn to you for that.
That's why I'm here.
It's Wednesday, September 25th, 2024. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick, along with Joe Kernen and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Here we go. Wednesday, it's hump day.
Meantime, let's talk about the Department of Justice now suing Visa, accusing it of propping up an illegal monopoly over debit payments by imposing exclusionary agreements on partners and smothering upstart firms, the agency says. It also goes on to say that Visa's moves over the years have resulted in American consumers and merchants paying billions of dollars in additional fees. It said those fees far exceed what it could have charged in a competitive market and were passed along to consumers, affecting the price of nearly everything that Visa called, everything that Visa touched. Now, Visa calls the case meritless. The company's general counsel saying, quote, today's lawsuit ignores the reality that Visa is just one of many competitors in a debit space that is growing with entrants who are thriving. And it's going to be an interesting one to see. This one.
You need to explain it to me again, because I would think that, I mean, my kids have all these other ways of paying. Are they included?
Square, if you're looking at
And
Apple
I don't
Pay.
know, everything Apple Pay. Are those? Are they not? Are they just again narrowing what they're looking at to
So this case, unlike a lot of the cases where I've said, oh, it looks like maybe
You agree with it?
It's more complicated because a lot of the feature set, when you're debiting cards off of this, right?
Yeah.
You think you're doing it through some other service.
You're using their network.
You're really using them.
You're still using Visa.
Bingo. And so that is the real question. Now, you're a Bitcoin fan, and maybe you think that Ethereum becomes a payment mechanism, and maybe there's other ways to do it. But in terms of debiting, not credit, but debit, these guys own a huge portion of the market.
And
there's still $2 trillion.
Is it monopolistic practices that allow them to do
That's
it?
what the Justice Department is claiming.
Well, they always say that, but is it true?
I don't know.
They're violating monopoly
laws. If you look at the
laws.
cost on those, it's lower than it is on credit card systems, for sure. I mean, I don't know. I've noticed places over the summer where it'll charge you 3% or a couple of bucks if you use your credit card. If you use debit, it won't charge you anything. So that speaks to the lower rates there. They should really be looking at the credit card stuff, probably. But there are about $2 trillion in U.S. transactions that go over debit card systems that are not going over Visa. But Visa does have a massive network, and they've made these partnerships with all these companies like Square and other to use those partnerships, to use their network. So that's where the Justice Department comes in.
So because I get the frequent flyer miles that are useless, but for some reason I still think that I get them, that I need them. I don't use a debit card. And also you don't want to use a debit card for like a big purchase.
Well,
right?
you don't. The reason I don't use a debit card, you don't want to use it so somebody gets your debit card numbers. I never put my PIN numbers in for that reason, because I did get ripped off at one point.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
I did for a while.
I use a credit card for different reasons, which is just both the points and the services that you don't get with the debit card.
That's what.
I've got a 1.5% cash back thing for everything I put on the credit card.
But more to the point, if you lose your thing, if you break your product, whatever, all of those things, that's what the credit card will protect you on. That's not protected.
But you, at this point, think that there may be some merit. See, I think this is meritless. Again, you
think
there
this is
is
confusing.
You think there's some merit to this, that they may have been
a little bit more complicated.
Did Visa actually stocks up? I mean, they're like rolling their eyes. They stock traders. at another frivolous DOJ suit that's not going anywhere.
Well, we'll see whether it goes anywhere. I think it could take a long, long time. But by the way, the credit card industry is credit card, Visa, MasterCard, Amex. Now you could say that's not a monopoly per se, but the way that there have been arguably monopolistic practices throughout, and credit card business, the financial system in this way is I keep using the phone as the example of this credit card.
Which tells you something
Which
too,
tells
right?
you something, but except that it's going through the phone, through the card, is like one of the great taxes on the system. I mean, it's actually quite incredible. I mean, it really is a 2 to 3% tax on everything you touch. You talk about tariffs. The credit card is a great tax/tariff on everything. And the question is whether you believe you're getting enough service for the 2 or 3% that you're paying more on everything.
You still got a diners club?
I do not.
Traveler's Chef?
Does anyone?
I do not. But just think about it. Go look at the market cap of Visa. Think about how much value. Think about it. No, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly successful company, and what are they doing? They're helping you with the payment, which is valuable to some extent. But the question is should it be that valuable?
And it's on
That's a
two
real
fronts,
question.
by the front. The DOJ is looking into this on two fronts. One is the loyalty fees, loyalty discounts that you get if you're a big vendor, if you push everything through their network. The idea of a disloyalty fee if you go elsewhere and give some of your business to somebody else. The other is the partnerships that they've struck up with all these fintechs.
I make a lot more deposits than payments. Just my life is mostly all deposits. Very few. Buy some food. That's about it. Right? Gas. I pay cash for gas, though, obviously. It's because you get
'Cause you save 10 cents a gallon.
The union representing thousands of striking Boeing factory workers said late yesterday that a survey showed its members were overwhelmingly against Boeing's latest offer, which it described as its best and final offer earlier in the day. Boeing said it would extend the timeline for a vote in the new contract after the union said, no, and rejected the initial Friday deadline. It's like, why Friday? We're gonna be, sucking you guys dry for weeks on this strike. Boeing's latest proposal included a 30-day or a 30% pay gain and the restoration of some performance bonuses. The union's been seeking a 40% pay hike and the restoration of a pension plan, defined benefit pension plan that was eliminated in its contract a decade ago. Striking workers are set to miss their first paycheck as a result of the strike this Thursday. We saw, as we have said, other unions get numbers like that when they held out. And I just think it's going to be hard to convince these guys to say, where's mine? Didn't some auto workers got the 40, didn't they, after being out for a long time?
They did. Phil LeBeau said yesterday that the pension wasn't the biggest sticking point.
I don't think that's a negotiating thing.
Well, I don't know. That seems like a...
No one's going to ever have that again.
I can't imagine. There's 10 million people who have pensions in the United States today. There's 90 million who have 401ks.
Yeah.
But that is a huge point, and the idea that they're not talking is probably the bigger point. The union management is mad, or union leadership is mad that management went around them, but the union leadership has been completely feckless in terms of being able to deliver anything at this point either. They recommended a deal that 96% of their membership turned down.
Federal judge ruling that a New York City law that requires food delivery companies to share customer data with restaurants is unconstitutional. The judge sided with DoorDash, Grubhub, and Uber Eats, saying the law violates the First Amendment by improperly regulating commercial speech. The law was adopted in 2021 as New York City tried to help restaurants recover from the pandemic. The companies argued that the law violated customers' privacy rights and was also harmful to their own businesses, since restaurants could potentially use that customer data for marketing purposes. It's an interesting case, guys, because I don't know how much you focused on this. This is the platform story. How much does Apple know, and how much does Apple or Grubhub in this case, or Google, or any of these guys need to share with the underlying businesses that are using their services? You're buying products from whomever, but you're doing it through another platform.
How much, by the way, as a consumer, do I have a say with this? I don't want you sharing my information with anybody. If I want my information given to someone, I'll give it to them.
Zero.
Yeah,
no, that's not true. Yes and no. What happens is you log on to the You log onto the thing and you consent to some screen that you can't read.
But the problem, you can't read it, and then if you don't consent to it, you can't get in, which is the biggest ripoff on this. My car is still sending me notifications that it is sending out information on me again, even though I've repeatedly asked them to stop doing this, and the dealer can't even tell me how to get out of this. Like, the amount of information that we're giving away, you have no option of not doing unless you don't buy a car or don't sign up for an app or don't do any of these things.
Glad I'm really boring and there's really nothing to get from me.
Yeah, watch out if they're watching your driving.
My driving's better lately. I've had some issues, People are...
You have mellowed.
In terms of
what?
You bring out the best in me.
And a new filing shows that Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway has sold an additional $863 million in Bank of America stock, trimming its stake to 10.5%. As long as Berkshire holds a stake of more than 10%, it has to disclose those trades in the stock within a few days. I believe it's 3 days, according to SEC rules. Berkshire began trimming that massive investment back in July. Even after months of sales, the remaining stake is still worth more than $32 billion based on yesterday's close. Berkshire is still Bank of America's largest shareholder, and I believe Bank of America is still the number 3 position. I think it was number 2 before behind Apple, and I think it's number 3 behind Apple and American Express at this point.
You want a quick boomer update? Just a quick one?
Yeah, we turn to you for that.
That's why I'm here. Warren Buffett was the answer, or the question on Jeopardy last night.
Oh, what was the question?
Just about started this, company back in this, whatever it was, 60s. It was the first one, the 200, but also T. Rowe Price, which I did not know was an individual, a guy named T. Rowe Price.
I didn't know that either.
Who started something with Lynch back in there. It was Charlie Merrill, and there were some other ones. And then I would also like to update you on the next thing that comes out. Ryan Seacrest is doing a phenomenal job.
On Wheel of Fortune.
He's a very happy individual. Vanna, they've got outfitted in a bunch of really young, bright clothes, and she looks good with Ryan. I don't notice any problem with, Vanna, and Pat was a little older than Vanna, I think, but the pair of these two are very good together.
He's
really, do you think?
Haven't watched.
If you see someone bad,
It's good for the update.
if you see someone bad at Wheel of Fortune, but you can see someone good. Ryan stepped into that like he's been doing it forever. He's phenomenal. He's really
smooth at just about everything.
But he's a happy guy. He's happy, affable, fun. He's not
just like us.
Just like us. So there you go. There you have it. I might do this.
What was the category?
I might do this every morning.
What was the category that all these business questions
like
were?
financial advice.
I think I'd be happy if I was Ryan Seacrest too.
I know.
Just so you know.
Yeah, making $100 million a year might make you. But,
you know that they tape like 5 shows in a day.
Yeah.
So that it's done in the court. The whole
I
thing
know how
is
it
done
works.
in like.
And
They're never going to let us do that on
like
Squawk.
a month.
They used to have one.
And then you're on vacation.
In the
for
old
rest
days,
of
they
the
used to
year.
have one.
But he's a very hard worker.
He works at
actually.
everything else. Yeah.
He's
They used to have one margarita per show taping too.
What?
In the old days, yeah, Pat and in the old days.
Cheese will be next.
Coming up, billionaire investor Lee Cooperman in a no-holds-barred conversation on the markets, his current favorite stocks, and his disappointment in the candidates for president.
Harris, you don't know what she stands for. It seems to me she wants to give away fish, and I'm big on teaching people how to fish. Big difference. And Trump, he's a bit of a head case.
Welcome back to Squawk Pod.
Up and Becky. Q.
You are watching Squawk Box right here on CNBC. I'm Becky Quick along with Joe Kernen and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Our next guest is a market veteran. Despite the daily new highs we've been seeing right now, he says he's less bullish than the consensus. Lee Cooperman joins us right now for a wide-ranging and exclusive conversation on the markets, the Fed, and much more. Of course, Lee is the chairman and CEO of Omega Family Office. And Lee, it's been a while since we've seen you. It's very good to have you on today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. How you doing?
We're doing good. We're doing good. It's 8:15. Made it through most of the morning so far. Lee, let me ask you. You have been concerned about the market and the heights of the market for some time. You've been warning that things could take a turn down and that you are less optimistic than others. We keep hitting new highs, and I just wonder when you think things would potentially be offset? I know you're still not convinced that good times are here to stay.
Yeah, well, I'm very concerned about two things. One is the debt buildup. We have two candidates running for office. Neither one talks about the deficit or the buildup of debt. In 2017, I think our national debt was $20 trillion, and 7 years later, it's $34 trillion. That's a growth rate far in excess of the growth rate of the economy, and that's going to be a problem one day. We don't know the day, but it's going to be a problem probably when we least expect it. And secondly, I would say, which kept me involved in the market, is if the 10-year bond belongs at 3.76 where it is currently, there's very little in the market that's overvalued, unless the 3.76 is reflective of a coming recession. And if it's 3.76 ex recession, there's very little that's overvalued. I go back to 1972 Nifty 50 when the market is selling at a much bigger multiple than it's selling at now, and the 10-year government bond was 6.5%. And in 2000, Cisco, which was the then present day NVIDIA, was selling at 380 times earnings. The 10-year government in 2000 was also 6%. So at 3.76, there's nothing that's overvalued, or very little that's overvalued.
So has the Fed cutting rates pushed you into a position where you're going to be putting a lot more into stocks?
No, I'm reasonably fully invested, but I'm invested in offbeat merchandise. I have a 20% position in a bond that I think the government's behavior is disgraceful. I discussed about it before. It's a little complicated. I have about 15% energy. Given what's going on in the Middle East, I would think energy would be a place to have some money. And then I have a lot of special situations. So, I'm not sitting on a lot of cash. And I think the Fed cutting rates is cutting rates in the short end. And I think the long rate is going to go up. The 10-year rate is going to go up as the Fed reduces short rates. So you get back to a positively sloped yield curve.
Does it make sense to you that the Fed cut rates, just looking at where you see the economy?
Yeah, I would say that the short rates are too high relative. Historically, the 10-year government bond is yielded in line with nominal GDP. So if you have real growth of about 2.5%, you have inflation of 2.5%, that would be 5% nominal GDP. So the 10-year would not be overvalued at a 5% yield, and it wouldn't be undervalued. I think the rates are going to go higher. In the short end, maybe you get 125 basis points over inflation. So the rate doesn't belong at the current level of 5%. So I think that the Fed will cut short rates, but it's not going to make much of a difference. You don't use a short rate to discount a long duration asset.
So your concerns about when we will have a problem on our hands, just in terms of when people won't buy the government debt, as you said, it's probably coming at the time we least expect it. How do you prepare yourself for that?
Well, I think, look, I may be too old. You take me out behind the barn and shoot me. I'm 81 years old. I've been through a couple of, bubbles, 2000 bubble and the 1972 bubble. In a bear market, he who loses least loses wins. So I would think that it's going to be hard to prepare, though I think stocks are the best place to be. I would avoid bonds. And you just don't know the timing. In 1972, two very civic-minded citizens, Pete Peterson and Henry Fowler, used to run full-page ads in the Journal and the Times, alerting the public to the evils of the budget and trade deficit. And here we are, 50 years later, and the only significance has been that we have the lowest interest rates in our lifetime. Now, I don't think it's sustainable. We had in the 70s the concept of guns and butter. We have guns and butter now. We're assisting in fighting two wars, and no one's focused on reducing the deficit. And we're going to ultimately have crowding out. That's my view. So I'm very concerned. I'm concerned about the election outcome. We got two people running for election. I don't hear either one of them talking about the need to deal with our fiscal issues. We got to finance these wars. We're not thinking about it. And whether the market forces us one day, who the hell knows? But I think it will. And so that leads to my conservatism. Not outright bearishness, but very conservative. I think the market at 21, 22 times earnings is fully valued and does not allow for the uncertainties that exist. That's my view, but I'm finding plenty of things to do in the market. I'll be honest with you. I find plenty of things to do. But everything I look at leads me to be cautious. Everybody talks about stock repurchase. And I would just observe what the wise man does in the beginning, the fool does in the end. How many billions of dollars of stock do you think Intel bought back? How much billions of dollars of stock did Bed Bath & Beyond buy back? Intel is now on government assistance, and Bed Bath & Beyond, the great retailer, is in bankruptcy. So there's no magic. You only make sense to buy back your stock if it's cheap. And if you're so far into a bull market, maybe your stock isn't cheap, maybe you're making a mistake.
Lee, why don't we talk about the things you are finding to do? If you've got 15% in energy because you worry what's happening in the Middle East and think that will potentially drive energy prices higher, where are you looking? Where have you invested the most?
Well, I have two large positions in two Canadian oil and gas companies. Paramount Resources, we've been going for a while. Stock yield 7%. They have virtually no debt. They're producing oil at $31 a barrel, and they're following a strategy of increasing production. So they're going to go from 100,000 barrels a day of production to probably 150,000 over the next few years, bringing down their average cost of production. So you have a debt-free company with a current dividend yield of about 7%. I find that's better than cash. And another company that is run by a very smart guy, Michael Rose of Tourmaline, one of the largest oil and gas producers in Canada. Stock has a fat dividend yield of over 5%, and run by a very smart guy. And I would think that given what's going on in the Middle East, there's a risk that oil prices move higher than we think. One that I have a very big position in, but it's complicated, is a company called Legato, which I've talked about in the past.
Sure.
This is a travesty of the U.S. government in terms of their behavior. These guys have $40 billion of assets, and you can create it in the market for $1 billion. And at the end of the day, they're suing the government for $40 billion. And I think that their lawsuit has a lot of merit. And I think the bonds are totally mispriced.
That's been years in the making, though. You've talked to us about that issue for years.
No, absolutely. But so I have a mark-to-market loss. But, the bonds, the first lien bonds, which I have a big position in, trade around 15 or 16 cents on a dollar. They're capitalizing the company at $1 billion. The company has a lawsuit against the government for $40 billion. If you read the lawsuit right up front, they say we have evidence that the government lied under oath. We have evidence that the government is using our spectrum without paying for it. And the government has made a sale of the company very difficult. They say if you buy Legato Spectrum, you can't do business with the U.S. government. Now, I think at the end of the day, this case is moving along. Recently, the judge presiding over the case issued a directive to both the companies, the government and the company, to respond to 7 questions. And he had to respond, I think, by September 8th. So they've already responded. And if you read the responses, they seem to be very much in favor of the company. So right now I buy the bonds at 15 or 16. I'm getting 17.5 points of PIK interest a year, which I realize are worth 0 if the company loses the case. If they win the case, I'm going to make 85 points of capital appreciation in the bonds, plus I'm going to get 17.5 points of interest. Even if it takes 3 years, I don't mind.
Lee, let's talk about what you've said about the election. You don't particularly care for either of these candidates. Do you think it makes a difference who wins in terms of how the stock market will react?
I think the stock market is reflecting a divided government. The stock market is acting like whoever wins the presidency, the Congress will be in a different direction. And that's possible. In 1976, I'll be very open, even though we have a closed voting system. In 1976, I did not vote for either Trump or Clinton. I voted Mitt Romney. In 2020, I voted for Biden, because Trump, whose economic ideas are superior to Harris. See, I'm a strange bird. I work very hard. I'm giving away all my money. Not half, I'm giving away all my money. So I'm sympathetic to the people that don't have it, and I'm trying to make the world a better place. But, Harris is, you don't know what she stands for. It seems to me she wants to give away fish And I'm big on teaching people how to fish. I don't want to give away fish. I want to teach people how to fish. Big difference. And Trump, he's a bit of a head case. He has 20 people in the past that were part of his administration that were typically very close to him, also they wouldn't vote for him, that he has issues. So, I can't ignore that. Plus, I think I've said in the past that, he mocked the New York Times report with cerebral palsy. You learn when you're 2 years old, you don't do that. He mocked John McCain. He was a true war hero, in my opinion. He mocked Nikki Haley's husband, who's serving with honor and distinction in the Middle East. And he denies having said this, but there are people that say otherwise, that he talked about the heroes that gave up their life in World War II were suckers. And he denies having said that. But there's enough other things he said. Having said that, I've read the Democrat platform, which is 80 pages long. I've read the Republican platform, which is 22 pages long. And the Republican platform resonates more with me. So my intention is I'm voting strictly Republican in the House and the Senate, but I'm not voting for president because I don't think either candidate is suitable to be president. And I'm hoping we have a divided government, even though at this time we need a unified government. We have to work together.
It's a conundrum, Lee. I want to thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure.
Next on Squawk Pod, the technology and politics of war, with a man who's been in the thick of both. Congressman turned head of defense at Palantir, Mike Gallagher, joins us.
Ukraine, October 7th, all of these things should have been a massive wake-up call, a Sputnik moment for America to rearm, reindustrialize. We went from being the arsenal of democracy to the DMV of democracy.
And the sentencing of a key player in the meltdown of crypto platform FTX, plus prison politics.
You have friends that are incarcerated?
When you know, you know.
You're listening to Squawk Pod. Here's Andrew.
On Tuesday, President Biden addressed the United Nations General Assembly and warned that we are at another inflection point in world history.
I put forward with Qatar and Egypt a ceasefire and hostage deal. It's been endorsed by the UN Security Council. Now is the time for the parties to finalize its terms, bring the hostages home, and secure security for Israel and Gaza free of Hamas grip, ease the suffering in Gaza, and end this war.
Joining us right now is Mike Gallagher, head of defense at Palantir. He's a former Republican congressman representing Wisconsin. Do you see any path to ending this war?
Well, I think these knee-jerk calls for a ceasefire, which the Biden administration has been pushing really since October 8th, actually bring us further away from an end to a war. I would like to propose a new theory of international relations, which is called winning. You have to win the war in order to impose the terms of the peace. And as for any action or resolution the UN can take, and Biden's calls for such a resolution pertaining to a ceasefire, we have something called UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which calls for complete disarmament of southern Lebanon, south of the Litani River. And Lebanon and Hezbollah has not disarmed. And Israel, with remarkable audacity, has actually reduced 50% of Hezbollah's long-range precision fires. And we should support them in that effort and in their efforts to destroy Hamas in the south.
And what's your sense, though, of what Iran does in retaliation?
Well, I think the key source of disorder in the region is the fact that Iran does not feel deterred. And the key problem that the next president, whether it's Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, will have to solve is how do we restore a semblance of deterrence? In my mind, that is supporting the complete destruction of Hamas, degrading and deterring Hezbollah. And then what the United States can uniquely do is actually destroying another terrorist Iranian proxy, the Houthi rebels, which have completely shut down commerce in and around the Red Sea. And we are now on the wrong side of the cost curve. Our enemies are counting down the bullets that are in our chamber. All of this depends on our ability to rebuild our entire defense industrial base, which this conflict and the conflict in Eastern Europe has revealed as broken right now.
Mike, is it purely partisan political talk to try to assign some blame to the Biden administration because he took off the sanctions in February of 2021, the UN sanctions. He hasn't enforced the oil sanctions. They're rolling in money in Iran right now to be able to fund all of these proxies. Why is that a stretch to say that this was on the Biden administration.
I don't think it's like a partisan hack attack. It's simple cause and effect, right? It's independent variable, dependent variable. We delist the Houthis. We prevent our government from selling offensive weapons to the Saudis to go after the Houthis. And what happens? They reemerge as even despite being like a two-bit terrorist organization, one capable of attacking the United States Navy. So I think that's a fair attack. But I do think Biden's UNGA speech is an opportunity for us to take a step back and assess this administration's overall foreign policy record.
But the rationale was that the 2015 pact that Trump exited, that this would make it easier to get back. So that there was like a method to the appeasement, wasn't there? But it didn't work, you would say?
Well, I think objectively, Iran is closer to sort of a turnkey away from having a nuclear weapon than it was at the start of this administration. The Trump administration, I think, would argue that a policy of maximum economic pressure was bearing fruit. Iran's economy is very weak. But if you don't pair that policy with a robust and credible military deterrent in the region, it's actually not going to have an effect. So that is the challenge going forward.
I mean, would you ascribe anything with Putin and Ukraine to saying that we'd be okay with them taking a little bit of Ukraine? Remember when he said that, and then a week later they...
I think all of these things are connected in the sense that you can draw a direct line from the Biden administration's disastrous decision to withdraw from Afghanistan for purely political reasons. And that was the president overruling his military advisors. I think that had an impact on Putin's calculus in Eastern Europe and on general global disorder and on the deteriorating balance of power in the most important region, the Indo-Pacific.
Well, but back to the Middle East with where we are right now and with Israel making these incursions into Lebanon to try and push Hezbollah back, with the missile that they launched, that Hezbollah launched into Tel Aviv essentially last night. I mean, one missile. The expectation is they have a lot more.
Yeah.
What happens now? Because Netanyahu's decision to push forcefully, where does that get us? And obviously they were dealing with attacks from October 8th coming from Hezbollah, but what about now?
I think the overriding political objective in Israel is to return Israelis to the north of the country. That until you actually force a disarmament in key parts of southern Lebanon, it doesn't have to completely comply with UNSCR 1701 that I mentioned before. That's going to be very difficult, right? You don't want Israelis being...
Is this different than before? Are we closer to an all-out war breaking out in the Middle East?
Well, in the Middle East, for the last 2 decades, we're always like on the knife's edge of an all-out war. Again, the path to peace, in my opinion, eventually runs through Tehran. You have to deter the primary adversary in the region and the thing that unites the Israelis. And the reason we're seeing a historic level of rapprochement and cooperation between the Israelis and the Sunni Arab Gulf states is because of this shared threat from Iran. The path to peace is not through peace process issues or the Palestinian issues. You have to build a regional strategy around deterring Iran. Otherwise, nothing else makes sense.
If Iran had the bomb right now, would it be a different situation with Israel right now? They seem to be... They don't really want to engage to the full extent that they could. They've actually shown restraint, which doesn't seem to go at all with what you think of when you say Iran. But they have.
But they could be waiting it out, right? They could be hoping that the next administration has a more friendly policy with respect to Iran, or continues to hope that by just merely reviving the lifeless corpse of the Obama-Iran deal, that somehow we will have deterrence in the region or a more peaceful Middle East, which I think the last 4 years have proven that's not true. So, I mean, we'll see. They could just be waiting us out.
Can I just ask a different question about, it's a political U.S. question about who is in the White House and how much, and how much that person, just through jawboning and presence, can deter anything. Meaning, there's this sort of idea you hear from former President Trump that if he was in this role, none of this would be happening.
We talked about concrete things like sanctions.
Well,
but you just mean being crazy.
I'm not crazy. No.
Just jawboning.
Just through sort of force of personality. Do you believe that through force of personality alone can change the dynamic internationally in these geopolitical tension points?
I do. It matters, right? There's an old saying, either attributed to Frederick the Great or Freddie Mercury. I don't know. It's that, diplomacy without armaments is like music without instruments, right? It needs to be backed by the credible threat of force. But the president's credibility or the perception of presidential power besides the conventional balance of military hard power, is the variable that matters most. And I do think there's a legitimate question right now as to who is in charge, right? And I worry particularly about this transition period between the election and January 20th. I worry that our adversaries, particularly the Chinese Communist Party, might try to take advantage of that moment, particularly if we are internally divided and at war with ourselves.
Okay, so what do you think? How do you think that would manifest itself? You're talking about Taiwan now?
Taiwan scenario.
You actually think that that's on the table come this Christmas, basically?
With the caveat that nobody knows what lurks in the dark mind and heart of Xi Jinping.
Right.
I have said on your show before that we've entered the window of maximum danger, and the minute he thinks that he can actually achieve his lifelong ambition, which is to take Taiwan by force if necessary, he will do it. And we are uniquely vulnerable in this period right now. Again, it gets back to the core point. Ukraine, October 7th, all of these things should have been a massive wake-up call, a Sputnik moment for America to rearm, reindustrialize. Right. We went from being the arsenal of democracy to the DMV of democracy, where our allies who purchased weapons from us are waiting for years to get there.
Can I ask you this? If you think that this country is going to be destabilized effectively in the months of November and December, who do you put that on?
The president is in office, right? He is in charge, right? He is still until January 20th.
We're already there.
Yeah.
But we're already there now.
I guess
but it sounds to me like you are suggesting that there could be a period of time in this country where we are genuinely destabilized because people don't know. I think you're going to debate about. You're saying right now because you don't think that
who's
Biden's
in charge right now
with the program? Is that what you're trying to suggest?
I think there has
saw the
been
debate. Come on.
Well, no. What I thought that he was suggesting was that there could be
I know you think it's Trump in January 6th or something.
No, that's what I think that's a huge part of the destabilizing.
I'm worried about if there's a president right now.
What worries me is I think there's an element in both parties right now that is sort of embracing a more isolationist view of the world, right? This idea that we've had unsatisfying conclusions to wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. There's a lot of skepticism about our ability to continue to support Ukraine, and therefore the solution is for us to retreat to Fortress America. Time and again, history has shown that is a bad look and a bad strategy. We need to somehow regain our self-confidence, abandon the self-loathing, and recognize that we are the good guys. There are enemies that are trying to destroy us and our allies, and we have to push back aggressively.
Mike Gallagher, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Carolyn Ellison has been sentenced now to 2 years in prison and ordered to forfeit $11 billion for her role in the fraud and conspiracy to FTX. Ellison was a star witness, you may remember, the prosecution of her former boyfriend, FTX founder Sam Bankman-Fried. The prison term was significantly stiffer, though, than the recommendation by the federal probation department, which proposed 3 years of supervised release with no time at all behind bars. The judge praised Ellison for her extensive cooperation with prosecutors, but said her criminal sentence needed to deter other potential bad actors from committing fraud. It's an interesting turn of events if you think about all of these issues, only because I imagine that when she decided to turn state's evidence, she thought, you know what, I'm going to somehow get off. And
well, she was probably told that they would recommend that.
Correct. Well, by the way, there's another case going on with Ryan Salem, you might remember, where he said that he only that he only worked effectively with the prosecutors and settled the case because they weren't going to go after his partner. And now apparently they're going after his partner, and he's saying, look, you need to undo this entire thing because I made a deal based on a thing.
Do they put that in writing when they make those deals, or is it just like a nod in a wink?
Yeah. I don't think they put it in writing necessarily.
I guess they can't because it's up to the judge's discretion eventually to go and do it. And I understand the judge's point that you want to deter future fraud, but I think the other side of that is you don't want to deter people from cooperating with the state, particularly on difficult cases that you wouldn't be able to prosecute without some of these witnesses.
But in a somewhat related story, multiple reports say that Sean Combs is living in the same unit of like a dorm Brooklyn jail.
I can confirm this. You don't need to say the other reports.
It's Sam Bankman-Fried.
Yeah. You
were over there or something? Or
I'm just saying I know.
You have friends that are incarcerated?
When you know, you know.
Yeah, you're right.
The MCC.
Wow.
There they re-sleeping? No.
They're in this dormitory style thing.
No, I know. I've seen it.
Yeah,
I visited once at LA jail. It's the scariest thing. And everybody's
right. These guys are not roommates per se. They're in a unit.
I get it.
Right.
Beds. It's very bizarre. A group of other defendants assigned to the same section Combs pleaded not guilty to charges of racketeering, conspiracy, and sex trafficking, but the judge denied bail, $50 million, saying it concerns that Combs would attempt to witness tamper. Combs was assigned to the special housing unit that often holds the high-profile inmates. Bankman-Fried has been housed in that jail since last year, when a judge ruled that he had violated conditions of his release and revoked his bail. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison, but remains in the Brooklyn jail while he is pursuing an appeal.
You have more details?
Not that many more details, just what we know for the most part.
Wow.
But no, all I'd say is it's not a detail. Typically, it shouldn't be surprising. This is what, when you have a high profile, usually it's like judges, policemen, celebrities are always put in the same groups of people. By the way, sometimes the worst offenders, because they're actually always worried that the other inmates are going to hurt them. That's the issue typically. So that the reason why oftentimes you'll see certain groups of people that you know of being high profile in one unit is because the goal is to protect them from
The only thing I would say is, the things that Sean Combs is being held for are like violent crimes.
Right, no,
oftentimes they're holding him on racketeering.
No, but oftentimes the highest profile people, sometimes white collar people, are typically put with what may be sometimes considered the most violent offenders because of the view that, if you're the head of a gang, you're often in that group because they need to keep that person away from the rest of the population. It's a very interesting sort of dynamic inside prisons.
That is way more.
Having spent lots of time reporting on white-collar crime in prison, oftentimes you're shocked by the people who are
in there at the same time.
In there at the same time, the same place.
That's our podcast for today. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernen, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin.
You have mellowed.
In terms of
what?
Catch them weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 a.m. Eastern. And get the best parts of our TV show by following Squawk Pod wherever you get your podcasts. On social media, follow us on X. The handle is Squawk CNBC. We're marking 5 years of Squawk Pod this week, and we'll be sharing there some of our best episodes. Have a lovely day, and we'll meet you back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.